Scandinavian Bob here, hi. I'm going to show you something interesting about dopamine. Remember the Richard Solomon's opponent graph, this one here, and how if you, for example, go out and get really drunk one night, you sail up here on the pleasure curve. But then there's a counter process after that, making you feel really bad with very low dopamine the following day. Which probably most of you have experienced at some point, right? Well, did you know that there are several versions of that graph and that this takes place on a micro level as well? Yes, on a minute-to-minute basis. Say you drink a milkshake and eat a donut during your break today. Well, that's a lot of sugar and fat combined, which is going to spike your dopamine. Well, actually, as soon as you see that donut and start anticipating it, the dopamine starts rising a bit, and then it rises a bit more during the minute you're eating it. But here comes the important part, so listen up now. As soon as you are done, there's a mini counter reaction. You go into a mini temporary dopamine deficient state where you go under your baseline for a few minutes. And listen up now. It is actually when you're down here when you are craving a second donut the most. Or even more importantly, you just start craving anything that will give you instant dopamine. Now, this is very important to understand for you if you have any addictions. But even if you don't, it's super valuable info. Because by knowing this, you can take advantage of that knowledge if you at some point want to structure your day in a way that you are least likely to do stupid stuff that you're trying to avoid. Like fapping to adult sites, going for alcohol, weed, junk food, or whatever you at the point are trying to avoid. Now, over the years, you may have heard experts saying something like, when your dopamine is high, you go for more. But then you perhaps heard somewhere else that when your dopamine is low, it's then you crave more dopamine. So, which one is it? Well, it's actually both. Whenever you deviate from your baseline, let's say you drink a bottle of beer tonight and you instantly feel the effects of alcohol. And so you get a small spike here. Well, many people are then going to feel a desire to keep that good feeling going. And that's why they have a hard time stopping after just one beer. However, for most people, it's more common to relapse or to go for some low-value dopamine when you are on this side of your baseline here. Because it's here that you feel a void. You feel that feeling. And that things are not really good the way they are right now. Like you are lacking something, that darker kind of craving. And this is exactly that void I've been talking about in my older videos. And this kind of craving is even nastier, I believe. Because this one gives you those powerful cravings to go for some instant dopamine in whatever form. And if you're addicted to something, you often have some kind of emotional triggers right then as well. And of course, if you are addicted to something, then the closest thing to instant dopamine your brain knows is your very addiction. So relapse risks are high. And by the way, this void I'm talking about here is on a shorter time frame. But if you are trying to quit adult sites or any other addiction, you are probably familiar with the big void that often happens during the second and third week, where you're really feeling down almost all the time. This is because you're really down here on that bigger graph, that longer time frame. And so you have painfully low dopamine levels for several days in a row. But back to the micro level. So on this side of the baseline, it's more likely a happy craving to keep it going. But on this side, it's more like that longing, that void craving. And again, for most people, this one is much harder to deal with when it comes to making them relapse. Now, what about dopamine fasting and its effects on addictions? Did you know that dopamine fasting can actually help you overcome an addiction And so why is this? Well, you probably heard about how low glycemic index foods may help you lose weight because they cause less spikes and crashes in your blood sugar levels, and thus you don't get as much hunger cravings. Well, same thing here. If you dopamine fast, you get less of those mini dopamine deficient crashes, and thus you get less of those void cravings. And obviously that is going to make you less likely to relapse as well. Now here's something important. Not all dopamine raising activities are going to be a problem. No. For example, going for a run in the forest raises dopamine. But that's only healthy, and it's not going to create any kind of crash after you're done. It just slowly goes back to baseline and it doesn't dip below. And thus it's a high value dopamine activity. And with those you never get any mini crashes either. In fact, you can actually use those to quickly get yourself out of a mini crash. On the other hand, if you try to go for more donuts, porn or alcohol to get yourself out of a hole, well then you're only digging that hole deeper by creating another deeper crash after that. So, dopamine fasting can help with addictions by eliminating all those small dopamine holes. But the second way dopamine fasting can help with addictions is even more powerful in my opinion. You see, dopamine fasting can help to overcome addictions because dopamine fasting can help to upregulate your dopamine receptors. And when that happens, your perception of dopamine changes. Now, you will still have fluctuations in dopamine, of course. But when you go down here, it doesn't feel as bad. You no longer feel that strong void or that you lack something in life. You know, if you're familiar with Gary Wilson's site, Your Brain on Porn, you have maybe listened to his radio shows over there. And in one of those shows, Gary interviews a brilliant man named Todd Becker. And he talks a lot about the positive effects of upregulating your dopamine receptors. And here on YouTube, he has some lectures as well, where he says that that would be one of the biggest things he would focus on if he was trying to overcome an addiction. Because with low dopamine receptor density, you're almost relentlessly craving something to make your life feel brighter, and normal day-to-day activities just cannot seem to deliver enough for you. And the third way dopamine fasting and its effects on addiction is interesting is related to what I just told you. If you proactively do things to upregulate your dopamine receptors, then you obviously also help to speed up your brain recovery after having had an addiction. Since the addiction knocks out your dopamine receptors and makes your reward system numb, then obviously speeding up the reversal of that is the same thing as speeding up your brain recovery after addiction, at least when it comes to one of the brain changes. Alright, I hope you found this informative, and also if you want to find out the state of your dopamine system, I have made a free dopamine quiz that you can take by using the link under the video. It's obviously meant to be a bit playful, but I really put some serious work into it, so go check it out. And if you really want to take your dopamine system to the next level, then make sure to check out my new online course, Dopamine Focused Fasting. I can leave a link to that course as well, and if you're watching this video over on my website, you can find the links down in the written text under the video. This is Scandinavian Bob signing out for today. Subscribe for more interesting videos, and as always, I wish you all the best in your journey to become a dopamine focused warrior.